Hey there, this is Natalie, and following my last video about the official crossover collaboration between ReZero and Mushoku Tensei, I thought it would be fun to think about a collaboration that doesn't exist, but which a lot of people would like to see. What if the strongest people from both stories had a fight to the death? So I'm taking Reinhard, the sword saint from ReZero's world, and Orsted, the dragon god from Mushoku Tensei, and considering what we know about each of them, to think about how a fight between them might go. First off, a few nerdy bits of background to consider when setting up this fight. There will be some spoilers about these characters and their settings from now on, particularly about Orsted, who we just know too little about from the anime to do this, so I'll need to refer to the full light novel series. I'll also be referencing the crossover short story. You don't need to know it to follow this analysis, but remember that as well as my video about the story, you can also get a full audiobook reading of it if you visit my Ko-fi page. You don't have to donate anything to download it, but if you can afford it, Mama's got to pay the rent, so I'm very grateful if you do. Now, on that basis, I'm going to be setting this fight between Orsted and Reinhard in the world of Mushoku Tensei. This is partly because we can use the collaboration story to know that Reinhard's abilities will work the same way in this setting. We see Subaru use Shamak in this world, so we can assume that mana works in the same way. And Subaru's return by death also works here. We don't see anyone use a divine protection, given Subaru doesn't have one, but these are similar in a lot of ways, although maybe it's more accurate to say they're more like opposite to authorities. So I think we can say that if return by death carries over, then all of Reinhard's blessings from his world will work too. Mushoku Tensei setting is also an easier one to use, simply because there aren't as many mysteries about how it works, where ReZero is still ongoing and these mysteries are still significant things. Now, I know a lot of the time when people do these kinds of what-if things about characters fighting, they don't worry too much about these kinds of details. Either because they make the fight impossible, or because the information just isn't there to figure out how different powers and abilities would translate between two stories. But since with these two stories, we do have that information, I figured, why not go the whole way and even figure out a reason why they'd be fighting? So we're not just doing some kind of isekai Smash Bros scenario, but actually working with these characters as a whole. After all, these characters in a good versus evil kind of framework are both good guys, and both allied with the protagonists of the stories. In Orsted's case, this isn't apparent yet in the anime, but I can say that Orsted's overall reasons to fight or kill, like Reinhard's, are not out of malice, the pursuit of domination, or personal gain. So in most situations, they would not try to kill each other. Reinhard will fight if he has been ordered to, if it's in line with his duty as a knight, or to protect civilians. He'll also obviously fight in self-defense, but he's so OP in his world that it's rare for someone who doesn't already fall under the categories of people he'd fight anyway to start a fight with him. The easiest scenario to kick off this fight then is for Orsted to start it. Now Orsted doesn't just go around killing randos, and given he has a curse that causes all living beings in his world to hate and fear him, he doesn't have that many direct interactions with people anyway. But we know from both the main Mushoku Tensei story and the crossover that he will immediately attack someone if he thinks they're being influenced by Hitagami, or the man god. You know, that weird dude that Rudy sometimes sees in his dreams. He is especially suspicious when the person in question is one he has never heard of before. This is because Orsted is repeating the same 200 years over and over again, with the end goal of killing Hitagami, and this is all due to the events of the prequel story Old Dragon's Tale, which I also have an audiobook version of that you can download on my Ko-fi page, or watch as a playlist of my YouTube channel if you would prefer it in installments. He notices people who have never appeared before, like Rudy and Nanahoshi, and also Subaru in the crossover, but he only wants to kill them if they admit to knowing Hitagami. So we really just need to have the plot of the crossover happen to Reinhard instead of Subaru. He's suddenly transported to the Mushoku Tensei world, and as soon as he falls asleep, Hitagami talks to him and tells him where he can find a magical tool that will take him home, a tool being carried by Orsted. Now with Subaru, Hitagami's idea here is to stop Rudy from dying, as he's still trying to win his trust. So he tells Subaru to find Rudy because the tool needs a huge amount of mana, and Rudy has that. With Reinhard, however, I think Hitagami would actually see an opportunity to kill Orsted fall unexpectedly into his lap. Reinhard wouldn't need Rudy's mana anyway, so rather than directing Reinhard towards Rudy, he'd send him straight on course to meet Orsted. It's worth noting here that while they're the strongest active characters in their stories, neither Orsted or Reinhard could kill Hitagami at this point in time. Not because he's strong, but because he's sealed away in a void between worlds, which Orsted needs to obtain certain things to access, one of which he can only get from Laplace after he's reincarnated, which won't happen for many decades. Hitagami can communicate through dreams, and even watch the futures of a few people at a time, but he can only affect the world by influencing those people, and even Reinhard wouldn't actually be able to fight him in this kind of dream meeting. So we'll take it that whatever Reinhard's various divine protections might tell him about Hitagami, all he can do is take the information about the magic tool and go with it. As he encounters Orsted, whether he knows he has the tool or not, Orsted would take an immediate interest in him, as he'd notice that he isn't automatically scared of him. People from other worlds are not affected by the curse. Reinhard is honest and not prone to bullshitting his way through things like Rudy or Subaru might have to at times. So I think he'd answer any questions Orsted had, maybe explaining what he's looking for and why. Orsted would then attempt to one-shot kill him, as he did to Rudy in the real Mushoku Tensei story, and to both Rudius and Subaru many times over in the crossover. This would be with a hand through the chest. Now Reinhard can automatically dodge any first attack, even if it's a surprise attack, and would then counter, probably with the kind of sword slash that we saw him use against Elsa in Season 1 of ReZero. And now, our fight is underway. So let's look at their comparative strength, skills and techniques. Reinhard's main source of OPness is the Odd Laguna, which is kind of the source of all things in ReZero's world, really seems to favour him. Now, this isn't the same as, say, Satella loving Subaru. Odd Laguna isn't like a being with a personality, it's more a force of nature. Tappei has compared it conceptually to the sun. Obviously it does more in the setting than the sun does in ours, including things like recycling souls when people die, but it's not written as a god that you can communicate with. It just is, and its nature runs the world. It is the source of divine protections, which aren't hugely rare in ReZero, unlike the comparable Miko abilities in Mushoku Tensei. But typically, someone with one of these blessings really does only have one. Otto can communicate with animals. Garfield can regenerate his health as long as his feet touch the earth. Krush can tell when someone is lying, and so on. But because Reinhard is Odd Laguna's best boy, he actually has the ability to ask for any divine protection and gain it instantly and permanently. So he has loads of them, including really obscure ones that must have been required once for a highly specific situation, like one that lets him tell salt and sugar apart. But he also has some that do much more useful things, like say instantly resurrecting him if he's killed. If an ability exists, then Reinhard can have it. Then, to make him even more powerful, he's also the Sword Saint. This is a designation that his grandmother previously held, which passes itself down to a worthy candidate at a time of its own choosing, and makes the holder what would be god level as a swordsman in Mushoku Tensei's world. There are downsides to being the Sword Saint in terms of the responsibilities and the fact that it will one day spontaneously leave you, perhaps even during battle. And we see this explored with Reinhard's grandmother Theresia. But for current Reinhard in this fight, we can just say it's all upsides, and equate it to being god level in all of the main sword styles in Mushoku Tensei. So how does Orsted compare? As the son of the original Dragon God of the Dragon World, Orsted was sent to the future of Mushoku Tensei's world by his dying father as the Dragon World was ending. He was stuck in a 200-year time loop until he can reach and kill Hitagami. So Orsted has some initial advantages. He's the son of the god of the strongest race in the setting, whereas despite all of his blessings, Reinhard is actually a normal human man. So with powers and abilities not being taken into account, Orsted is far stronger and more resilient. Orsted has also lived and fought for thousands of years, whereas Reinhard is about 19 at the start of ReZero. So while both characters are of high intelligence, Orsted is vastly more experienced. The Dragon God gave Orsted all of the powers and abilities of the dragon race, and also arranged for him to be able to learn all of the many techniques he might need via Laplace, or rather, in the end, the part of him now known as Technique God. This stuff is really complicated, so check out my Laplace video if you want to know more. Over his many lifetimes, Orsted has mastered every fighting style and learned even obscure and now unused magic like teleportation, largely thanks to provisions Laplace made to help him before he even arrived in this world. So basically, just like Reinhard, in combat he is god tier at every martial arts style, and can use any ability that exists in the setting he is in. So what could decide who would win? Well, the most obvious thing if you're familiar with Mushoku Tensei post-anime is that Orsted has one big weakness: his slow mana regeneration. If Orsted depletes all of his mana in a battle, it will take decades to regenerate it. For most people like Rudy, it just takes a day. So, initially, I was thinking that Reinhard would be able to win simply by attacking and surviving until Orsted has depleted his mana, at which point he would only be able to use physical attacks and maybe some Dragon Race specific abilities, whereas Reinhard would be able to use all of his skills, and so would win, even if after a very long and challenging fight. But would this actually happen? Reinhard doesn't know this is Orsted's weakness. In fact, almost nobody does. It's only revealed to Rudy when he becomes a trusted ally, and partly because the battle with Rudy actually invoked this problem. Reinhard wouldn't therefore think to exhaust Orsted's mana. For all he knows, it could be endless. Plus, there are a couple of quirks to both of them that would throw a spanner in the works. When Reinhard gets serious, all of the mana around him is directed towards him. We see this in ReZero as a reason why he can't really fight together alongside magic users, but here it would actually prevent Orsted using mana, so he wouldn't be able to deplete it. Now that makes it sound like Reinhard would be fighting manaless Orsted either way, so would still have the advantage. But Reinhard wouldn't be able to use magic-based attacks either. This is because Orsted can use a Dragon Race specific set of skills called Dragon Gates, which can nullify even powerful magic. Okay, so couldn't Reinhard just wish for the divine protection of Dragon Gates don't work on me? Well, no, because divine protections come from Odlagna, and Odlagna would have no concept of ancient skills from the Dragon World, which no longer exists. Both fighters, as they start to see what their opponent can do, will begin to favour physical attacks, and this fight would go on for a very long time. Orsted would have the better endurance for a long battle. There are fights won by dragon race people in Old Dragon's Tale that go on for weeks with no breaks, but Reinhard can just wish for the divine protection of never needing to sleep or something to keep on going. The thing is, eventually one will land a killing blow. If Orsted kills Reinhard, his divine protection will just bring him back, so that's not a winning state for Orsted. If Reinhard kills Orsted, however, while he won't just resurrect where he fell like Reinhard can, he will basically return by death, only to over 100 years ago. This would very much balls everything up for Orsted, as the current world state where Rudy and Nanahoshi exist offers him the best chance of finally achieving his goals, and they won't ever pop up again. But Orsted wouldn't be dead. How this would affect Reinhard is hard to say. Orsted would be resetting time in his world too long before Reinhard was born, but this probably wouldn't affect the ReZero world. So perhaps instead of Reinhard ceasing to exist as that timeline is reset, it would just make it so he'd never been to Orsted's world at all, and he'd just find himself at the moment in Lagunica before he was transferred over there, with no memory of anything that happened. And he'd presumably just carry on with the rest of the story of ReZero. This outcome would be better for Reinhard than Orsted, so I guess we can declare Reinhard the winner. But I have seen other people suggest that Reinhard could actually win properly, as in he could permakill Orsted by destroying his soul, so there's nothing for his memories to remain in, preventing him from being reborn, or at least reborn with his memories. Now, while this would be possible in terms of what Reinhard can canonically do, it's one of those things that could also be explained away by whatever the author felt like that this wouldn't work. We don't know the rules or mechanism of how dragon race reincarnation works. But I kind of think it's a moot point anyway, because why would Reinhard even think to do this? He doesn't know that Orsted loops like this. Orsted isn't like Subaru. He absolutely can talk about it, but he doesn't, at least not to random people. He's not exactly chatty anyway, after thousands of years of everyone he meets instinctively hating him. So, if Reinhard lands a killing blow, it wouldn't occur to him that he'd need to do something as extreme as to destroy his soul. After such a long and challenging battle, Reinhard would likely have more respect for the man than for this to be his idea. And so, there we are. As I see it, it would be a battle for the ages. But in any evenly matched fight, the odd lucky hit will eventually happen. And when it does, this is worse for Orsted than for Reinhard, though one cannot kill the other. There is another very extreme situation that could happen, where the stalemate goes on for years, and at some point Reinhard loses his Sword Saint abilities. So with this being a physical fight, Orsted would suddenly be the better fighter. However, Reinhard would still have his divine protections, so he's still very hard to kill. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments, and remember to visit my Ko-fi page linked in the description if you want my audiobook readings of the crossover story and Old Dragon's Tale, plus other Mushoku Tensei and ReZero stories, or if you just want to donate to help an impoverished cat girl. Nya? Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again very soon.